How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great discussion. We're going to talk about signs you are losing your sense of authority. Now, don't forget, guys, I did a quick blurb on this a couple of days ago, and I wanted to actually have a discussion. So I wanted to bring Russ and Joe on so we could discuss a couple of areas in which, or signs that will go ahead and kind of let you know or let your peers know that you're starting to lose that sense of authority. I think it's a great dialogue because we always talk about how to maintain that sense of authority, how to develop that sense of authority. But what about if you have it and you're starting to lose it? You know, what are some of the signs that you may feel, or what are some of the signs that your peers may see? And I think it's going to be a great dialogue. And guys, I am developing that rookie book. I'm trying to come up with daily topics. There's a lot. Remember, I need about 365. I'm in the middle of March right now. It's already at 40,000 words. So you're looking at a book that's going to be a very big book, but it's going to be a daily reader for rookies. So I'm going to keep on pushing out these thoughts. And as I come up with the thoughts, I'll work with myself and ChatGPT to pretty it up. But I'm very happy with what is coming along, and I'm excited. Hopefully I can get it out by next year. But a lot of these discussions that we've been having recently are coming from the topics that we're discussing in that new book. And guys, don't forget, I got other books on the market. We have Inmate Manipulation Decoded, Breaking Boundaries. That's available on Amazon. And then I got also books on leadership and just the likes, Blue 360 Media. And guys, for that rookie book, I do have a book out now that could partner well with that book, which is Tips for Correctional Officers and Their Supervisors. So I'm trying not to revisit the same tips. So you're definitely going to want to get the one book that's out now, and then when I do the other book, because it's gonna kind of partner together. All right, let me get who do we got first? We got Russ. Russ, what's going on, brother?
Hey there, Anthony. How's it going, sir?
Good, Russ. You mind introducing yourself, sir?
Sure. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I'm also a former senior juvenile correctional officer. I currently work for a company, a private company, where we do reentry and rehabilitation work for a local probation department and a local county jail where I am the case manager. I am also the founder of Keepers of Chaos on Facebook, and that's chaos with a K. And we are dedicated there to helping people realize their full potential, giving them support, mentoring them, training, background, history, the whole 9 yards about corrections. And I think it's something that's really needed because this is a very difficult and dangerous field to be involved in. And, the reason that I started it way back when, I don't know how many years it is now, was, to be a support venue for the correctional officer.
Yes. And by the way, guys, just the connections you can make there. I mean, these are people that have either worked or are still working. And I see people since Russ is open that have really, truly remained friends. I mean, the next thing we'd like to do for Keepers of Chaos eventually is maybe have a conference one day and just kind of get everybody in the same room, closed doors, and we all just sit down, talk shop, open format. We don't need PowerPoints. We just want to sit down, have a couple of drinks, and just talk shop and make sure that we pass off the right lessons to the new generation of correctional professionals. And by the way, all walks of corrections is invited.
Absolutely.
You walk in here, come on in. All right, let me get Joe. What up, Joe?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Joe, you mind introducing yourself, sir?
Yes, sir. My name is Joe Pomponi. I'm a retired lieutenant from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, 29 years and 6 months, and currently working as an assistant jail administrator in our local jail division at the Sheriff's Department, and a panel member here for Tier Talk.
We should do a poll. Do you like maybe saying like Department of Corrections or Department of Criminal Justice? What sounds better? I'm going to be honest with you. I like that Texas Department of Criminal Justice. I just like the sound of that.
Hired in, it was Department of Corrections, and then they, wanted to change the name, make it sound more friendly, and yeah.
Oh. Yeah. So you were there when they made the shift, huh, Joe?
Yeah, pretty much. Me and Jesus. Yeah.
Just like Russ was one of the founding fathers of the Constitution. Hey guys, this is going to
Uh,
be a great dialogue. Again, it's talking about signs you're losing your sense of authority and corrections. Again, the video I did a couple of days ago, I just kind of read a blurb from the upcoming book. But what I wanted to do is take the bullets from that and really dive in on the discussion. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to say what each bullet is, and then I'll let them speak first, and I'll come in on the back end because I don't want to influence what's being said, because I feel I gave something in the last dialogue, but I may want to feed off from what they say here. So I'll kind of alternate, go Russ, Joe, Russ, whatever it is. So again, guys, it's signs you're losing your sense of authority and corrections. And mind you, guys, how we do it, Joe and Russ, or Russ and Joe, they don't know what bullets are coming their way. So it's pretty cool to see them think on their feet. So I'll go with Joe first, Russ first. So Russ, the first thing I got was, I think this is definitely a sign that you could be losing your sense of authority. And guys, one last thing. For us, we should feel this. And for our peers that are watching our backs, they should see this in us. So we feel it first. They will see it, but technically we feel it first. So the first thing I got, Russ, is, and some of these may bleed into each other, but just we'll figure it out. Hesitation in enforcing rules. So let's talk about that, Russ. Why would that happen?
Well, that is the real question. Is why would you second guess yourself? But there are some things that I can think of where this could come into play, even for a very experienced officer. And I would say that this is where rules have changed or new rules have been instituted, and there's been a lack of training on that particular new rule or change in the rules, where you are not sure about them. But this is the case where you should actually be doing your own follow-up to be able to make sure that you're implementing it correctly. Or you can just, do kind of the thing that was what I like to do, much to the chagrin of some of my supervisors, is that I would really rather, ask for forgiveness than beg for permission, is how they put it to me. And so it's just one of those things where you should know enough about things to be able to implement things on your own, but maybe not. So if you're doing that, it's one thing. The other way it can go is if for some reason you're having some kind of personal crisis of confidence, in which you just, for some reason, feel like you're not being effective in your role, and something has jolted you into a position into not thinking you're where you should be within your professional acumen, your professional guidelines, if you will. And I would say that tends to be where I would see this occurring.
Yeah, and Russ, I would like to say something. So hesitation in enforcing rules, I kind of see it as an umbrella, because a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about will probably ultimately lead to the hesitation of enforcing rules. More importantly, maybe enforcing the rules consistently. But I like what you first mentioned that I don't want to overlook. I definitely like the confidence part, 100%. But I like what you said, because this kind of, the first thing you said kind of pushes it outwards towards maybe the agency. Like, are we making sure that the staff are aware of these changes, but more importantly, how to tactically apply it? Are they involved in those changes? So that that's a good kind of look at ourselves in management or our supervisors, saying, hey, maybe is he hesitant because or is she hesitant or he hesitant because they lack confidence, or are we not doing enough to basically provide them enough information so they can be effective, whatever those changes are happening. That was a good point, Russ. I didn't think about that. Oh, nothing? No response on that, Russ?
I thought you were going to go to Joe. Yeah, I think I pretty much covered what I thought about that.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that. Let me get us all back on. All right, Joe. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the first one would be, total lack of confidence in your ability to, enforce your authority. You see a lot of that, especially with people who are beginning their careers in corrections that, may not have held a job where, they've had any kind of authority, and now they're put in a position where they're having to enforce authority. And sometimes hesitation does come with that because, you're afraid to stir the pot or you're afraid of pissing somebody off. The what they call the new boot jitters. The flip side of that is, I've seen policy and procedure change that staff didn't necessarily agree with. Therefore, they were hesitant to enforce that policy, because it was something they didn't believe in, something that they disagreed with. But moreover, I think, and I agree with Russ that I think the vast majority is going to be the employees that are hesitant to enforce the rules because of confidence issues or, insecurity issues.
Yes. And guys, I think for me with the hesitation, I mean, we're going to get into other areas that can cause you to be hesitant, but I have to lean on what Russ says. It's the confidence, kind of same as Joe said, is, when you start feeling that lack of confidence and whatever the reason is, because we'll go over some reasons here that can cause lack of confidence. But I will tell you one thing, and I'm sure we all agree, that hesitation is easily seen by the inmate population and will be challenged. So if at any point you slow down in that authority, because that's your number one tool is your authority, and you become hesitant in what you're enforcing, the inmates will see that as a weakness, and that kind of gives them a chance to challenge it more. And I think that definitely is a big concern because hesitation is so easily seen. So, all right, so that's number one. And again, you feel that first. Would you agree with that, guys? Do you feel yourself become hesitant first before even your peers may start to see it? Because I think you kind of feel it because maybe there's something going on in your head, and then all of a sudden, just whatever is affecting you mentally, your behaviors are going to react to that. So I think it's something that you start to feel first, whether you start not wanting to utilize your authority could make you hesitant, like not putting yourself in situations where you feel that your authority is going to be challenged. I think that for me, I always prepare for my authority to be challenged. I always prepare. So I'm not hesitant because I'm ready the moment it gets challenged. I think a lot of people may become hesitant because they don't want to go ahead and showcase their authority because they're afraid that at any moment someone's going to try to challenge it, and either it's just not, they don't feel like being challenged or whatever it is. But I think a lot of people that may second guess their authority or become hesitant is because maybe they're not prepared or preparing themselves for their authority to be challenged. Does that make sense? I'll start with Joe first, kind of on the same subject, but.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, everybody's had that moment in their career, when it comes to enforcing a rule, because, it's a rule that, it may be something stupid and small, like a contraband t-shirt. You see an inmate wearing a contraband t-shirt in the day room, and, your supervisor tells you, hey, that convict's wearing a contraband t-shirt, go get it. You're the new boot, So you're walking over there to this, 280-pound guy, built like a brick shit house, and you got to go get that t-shirt, but your brain is screaming abort, 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 abort. So there's going to be hesitations in there, and if it's a test on both sides, and both sides are watching you because the convicts are watching to see if you're secure enough to go over there and actually do your job, which starts that kind of respect level. And your supervisors are looking at you too, or your coworkers may be looking at you to see if you're going to stand up and actually do your job.
Yeah, I agree. And Russ, what's your thoughts about, are there any maybe pieces of advice when it comes to people maybe concerned about their authority being challenged, and maybe that's what makes them hesitant?
Let me kind of frame it this way: is that there's a lot of reasons why people do or don't do things, and some of the things that I've seen along the way. Sometimes a failure of staff to, fully take on what I call that mantle of responsibility, that mantle of duty. And they tend to kind of, shirk away from it a little bit. Sometimes because, no one else is doing it. No one else is taking on, that full speed ahead. Hey, we're going to do this. We are the ones running this unit. We are the ones running this prison. and they just kind of, leave it for other people to pick up. Sometimes because they don't feel like they're necessarily going to be backed. I recall, one time, coming to a new unit, and I'd been there, a couple days or whatever, and it just seemed a little bit, lackadaisical to me. And they were kind of, just letting, some of these guys in the gangs and stuff do whatever they want. And I was out there, in the, I think it was in the dining hall one morning, and these white guys are going out there, and they're like 1488, and saying this crazy skinhead BS. I said, no, man, we're taking this on right now. So we went down there, proned these guys all out, took their cards, and started writing them on the elements of gang culture. And it was just like, people were letting a lot of things slide. And it's kind of like when you hear about some of the stuff that's, gone on like in New York City lately, with the whole idea about why did they ever abandon the broken windows ideology, where, they went ahead and they were, basically jamming people up for every single thing. Because otherwise, where do you draw the line where you're no longer enforcing the rules? And so you have to be really proactive, and you have to be really hard at the beginning before you can afford to back off a little bit and let some things play out. And so that's just been kind of my philosophy, is go in there and take the rule book and beat them up with it every single day until you get compliance.
Yeah, and guys, that's great advice. We tell that to our rookies all the time, is the fact that you gotta, when you need that confidence at the beginning of your career, you're going to lean on that policy and procedure, which means that you are going to have to welcome conflict, because inmates are going to try to circumvent that. So you're not going to enforce it until eventually you start leading towards expectation and discretion. But I think in my career, I've seen people that were afraid to have their authority challenged, only because it may involve a bit of a back and forth with an inmate. And in some cases, I've had officers tell me, the back and forth is never in a controlled, quiet area. The back and forth, it could usually be in an area where other inmates could see it. And then, if the inmate has a quick mouth or whatever it is, the challenge to the authority could also start becoming personal attacks on the officer trying to implement it. So now the officer's here trying to implement a directive, trying to remain professional. The inmate obviously is pushing the buttons. And then when the inmate kind of makes it personal, the officer pride get attacked, but the officer's hopefully doesn't start trying to going back and forth in an unprofessional manner with the inmate. But then you got the concern where the inmate is just saying shit that winds up to be so degrading to the officer. And then the officer, in his effort to, try to push that authority, winds up losing it, because the one inmate is getting the crowd on his side. And I've seen that. I've seen officers tell me that they're afraid that if they go to challenge challenge the inmate a bit, especially if they can't get the inmate into whatever it is, into somewhere private where they can have a discussion, it becomes a show where the inmate is just trying to showboat. But we've always told people, you don't do the show. But at that point there, kind of keep your mouth shut, call for backup, and we don't need to talk. We don't need to go ahead and have that back and forth. This is what I told you to do. They could say, oh, you're still not doing it? Okay, fine. One more chance. I'm not having that. One more chance. But one more chance. Okay, not a problem. Hey, Sarge, can you stop by the unit real quick? Because the last thing you want to do is, in an effort to keep your authority, you want to make sure you're not chasing your pride. So I told people, like, when you're concerned about that little showboating, you shouldn't be. Because you're not there to have a back and forth. That back and forth is only going to happen if you continue to allow it. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. You have to figure out where the breaking point, where the tipping point is. And I think that a lot of it has to do, though, with you really have to be decisive in playing the long game. If you're playing the short game, it means that you always have to react right then, rather than keep the pressure up, over a day, a week, a month, a year, however long it takes. And you will eventually keep that person under your thumb. But you got to play the long game, because we're not equipped to play the short game, because we have other considerations at play, like laws and rules and prohibitions and things like that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, as we're talking about this, like, I mean, pride matters, don't get me wrong, but your authority connects more to your confidence, because the pride could connect to your ego, but definitely your authority connects to your confidence, and you got to make sure that that's unshakable and you have total control of that. So I have this as the next one. I'll go with Joe first. Kind of, these may all bleed into each other a little bit, but allowing inmates to challenge decisions without consequences. So I'll go with Joe first. Okay, so both of you guys definitely feel this a little bit. So go ahead, Joe. What do you got, brother?
Yeah, again, you see it when the inmate population sees a weak employee. This is what we used to call it, officer run me over. They would go in there and state their not demand, but their request of what needs to be done, their order. And the inmate would, I'm not fucking doing that. And instead of the officer saying, well, yeah, you are, you are absolutely going to do that. Some of them tend to say, well, you know what? It's not that big of a deal. It's over a t-shirt. I'm not going to get into all that with him, and I'm just going to go about my business and complete my duties. It's one of those things where, depending on the client, the climate of the facility, especially if you're in a max facility, a hard facility, if you don't sweat some of the small shit, that's when it turns into big shit. So, being able to use your verbal skills to dictate to this inmate, this is how it's going to be. This is how this is going to play out one way or the other. This is where, you have to be confident in your ability to A, deliver the order, B, to follow that order up and make sure that order is enacted. You should never, ever, 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 regardless of how small, how minute the situation is, if it's a cell light that's got a cover on it, a cell window that's got something on it that's blocking your view, never let an inmate challenge your decision and not have consequences for him challenging your decision. I mean, it's very simple, very basic. I gave you the order. This is what the order was. You're going to follow the order, and I'm going to get my compliance. It shouldn't be anything less than that. Now I'm not saying charge in their head full of steam and go and just rush in there and go get your ass whipped over a picture that's blocking the window, or something that's covering a cell light. I mean, you have to, it's one of those things where I used to tell the staff, location, location, location. Is the inmate secured? Is your safety secured? Before you get into it with an inmate, you always want to make sure that your safety is paramount, that if shit breaks bad and goes sideways, you have a way of getting out of that situation physically, backing out of it. But, always, even if it's, no matter how small it is, get your compliance. If you have to call a supervisor down there to gain it, that's fine. The inmate may be testing you. It may be just game. They want to see how far are you willing to take this situation. Are you going to get a supervisor down here to get this this cover off my cell light? Or are you just gonna keep on walking? Because that tells me that, I'm basically going to be able to get away with what I want to get away with, because all I got to do is challenge your authority and you're just going to burn off on me.
Joe, there's something that you said that I think we should take note of that may not have been discussed here before. And I would love to get maybe if Russ on his thought, he could also touch on this too, is that you have, when it comes to the authority, you let's say in this case, given a directive, you have the order and you have the follow through. The follow through is the hard part, because the follow through is you now defending the order, which could come in reinforcing it or could come in the consequence of you not complying. And I think that's where people start to lose their authority, is in the follow through. You know, it's literally, okay, I've given the order, okay, but they haven't done it. What have you done? And maybe it's like, okay, yeah, you're pretty good at barking orders, but you're pretty bad at following through. So your authority seems to be very surface. But I thought that was a great breakdown of, at least when it comes to giving your directives, the difference between just giving it and then the follow through being I think the more important part, because that's when you have to stand tall and defend what it is that your expectation. And most people, that's where you can see when they're weak. And actually, you know what's funny, going back to what we just discussed, if you look at, and Russ, I'd love to get your thoughts on this too, just building off what Joe said. If you get your order and the follow through, maybe the hesitation's in the middle between the both. Maybe somewhere along the line, the hesitation is in the middle between the order and then the defending the order through the follow through. What's your thoughts on that, Russ? That was a good thought by Joe.
Yeah, I think I'd more like dovetail on the part where Joe was talking there about making sure you get that compliance. Because I'll tell you something. You only have so much effort that you can put into each day at work, and if you start losing even very small battles along the way, what happens is, as your authority erodes, the amount of effort that you have to put into a single day increases, and I mean increases exponentially. I was always of the thought that, not that I was lazy, but I wanted to expend very little effort in that. And the way that you expend very little effort is by putting all of your effort at the top end of the thing and always coming out a winner, always coming out on top, always gaining compliance, because otherwise it just becomes work. And you'll never get ahead of it. You'll never be in a position where you're actually, running that unit wherever it is that you are. And I just cannot imagine ceding even one little battle to an inmate and it not having a huge effect down at the other end of the day or the other end of the week. And then you're just falling apart and you're not getting any compliance from anyone. And then, how do you get that back? There's no coming back from that. I shouldn't say there's no coming back from it, because I believe that there is. But, then you just have to become, the comeback king. And I question whether there's very many people that can actually do that. It's better to stay on top of it and to be out in front of it than to have to chase it.
Yeah, and guys, I want people to make sure we're not saying follow up, we're saying follow through. But like Russ said, I like what you're saying, Russ. If obviously, for the most part, when you set the expectations, the inmates are gonna, this is my order. You're gonna follow it. We kind of have those set expectations, but I guess once in a while, when an inmate goes to challenge you, that's where now you have to kind of get into that follow through mode. I always tell people that even once in a while, senior officers who lead by expectation could find themselves also in reactionary mode when you have an inmate that brings them backwards, that doesn't do the expectation and kind of challenges things. And then now the officer has to stand ground a little bit more and defend the order. But you're right, for the most part, if you're seasoned and the inmates know what to expect from you, you're just kind of giving the order. There's really, the follow through is not needed unless it's challenged, correct?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And you're going to get to a point, though, if you're not on top of it, where you can never go far enough, because by then the inmates are laying out distractions for you, diversions, and you're going to fall for each and every one of them, or you're going to capitulate and you're going to, cede all of the territory to them, and then you're going to become ineffective. And when you're correctionally ineffective, that's where real danger lies, because that puts you into a position where it's not that you can't win, it's that you're not even playing the game.
Yeah, and I actually had the distraction part somewhere down here. It's pretty cool how we were able to kind of. I mean, these topics tend to bleed. These bullets tend to bleed in each other anyway. I have another bullet. Got a few.
Let me real quick
Okay.
before we go to the next one. There's just something that came to my mind that when it comes to the enforcing decisions, the one thing you have to keep in mind is location. You don't always have to go to the circus, but what I mean is, to the crowd of inmates when you're trying to single one out for something that he's doing wrong. Don't go to the circus. Take the clown from the circus. Let him come to you, because you're more apt to get compliance in a one-on-one situation than you are trying to go in there and bark an order to one convict who may be standing around 30 of his homeboys. So think about the location. If it's not emergent, it's not safety related, it's not imminent bodily harm or anything like that. Again, if it's something simple or stupid, it doesn't take, like if you're running day room and you're running an in and out, and you're putting a group up and one of them has a bootleg t-shirt, you put them up and you tell that convict, hey, come here for a minute. Let me holler at you. Say, that t-shirt is bootleg. Let me have it. All his homeboys are already in the cells and locked up. So, he's more apt to do it in a one-on-one than if you try to go to him in a group environment and, try to state your orders that way. So always think about your location.
Yeah, the group think is always a problem. A one-on-one will get you a totally different inmate 99% of the time, because they don't have the audience. I love that. Yeah, always make sure that the environment will support your directive and not be an extra obstacle to it.
Yep.
And you know what, guys, on top of that, let me just add to Joe's talk, is that's spot on, is that if I feel that the environment becomes an obstacle, then the problem is my follow-through is going to be weak, because I'm not really focused on the order. I'm focused on everything else around it. So you're right. Let's bring this inmate by himself if possible, and let's really get this one-on-one going so I can stay focused on what needs to be delivered, as opposed to trying to win the crowd over and then get the order after I win the crowd over, right? Technically, that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one, hold on. I got to fix how I spelled policy here. Forgive me, guys. I spelled policy wrong here, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that. No shame in my game. POLICIES. There it is. So now this to me is definitely something where you feel like you should. You may recognize it first or feel it first, but your peers will definitely know this. When you're inconsistent with the application of policies or expectations. So what do I mean by inconsistent is, there could be a couple ways. Inconsistent depending on the inmate. I'm closer to this inmate than that inmate, so I'll give this inmate a little leeway. Or inconsistent with the rules that you're expected to carry out. Like, I know, this one management wants, but the inmate's going to challenge that too much, so I'll do this, but I won't do this. So again, or inconsistent what your peers are doing. Especially your partner. My partner's running it the right way. I'm running it this way. And the inmates now have that mom and dad game that they can play. So I definitely feel when you have that inconsistent application of policy or expectations, one officer is always the weaker officer. The officer that could be swayed from kind of doing what's expected. I'll go with, I guess, do I start with Joe first or Russ? Is it Russ? No. It's let's go with Joe first, I think. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, you need to. This is where you got to have total cohesion with the rest of your shift. You guys have to be on the same sheet of music. You can't be inconsistent in the way you enforce rules. One boss can't be one way, another boss be another way. There has to be consistency and conformity within the shift and how it functions. Because again, the inmate population is watching, so they know. And it's not that that they label one officer weak for not enforcing a rule, they're looking at that officer because, you know, they think that officer just doesn't give a shit. They're just there for the paycheck. So again, they're gonna get away with what they can, because why? Because they're the convict, and, you know, our job is to catch them. So, you know, if you have a shift that is cohesive and consistent in the way they enforce rules and procedures, it's a much better atmosphere, because when that shift comes on, you know, the inmate population knows, okay, here we go, game's over, we got to mind our P's and Q's. You know, there's no extra steps you have to take in order to enforce the rules. If you have an officer that does enforce the rules, you have an officer that doesn't enforce the rules, and then a third officer comes in after the officer that doesn't enforce the rules leaves, it makes that officer who is trying to enforce the rules, it makes their jobs tougher, because, you know, the officer before you didn't enforce anything. You know, it causes so much undue and unneeded drama for both your coworkers, your shift, and the inmate population. Because, you know, a lot of the inmates nowadays, you know, well, when I started 30 years ago, you know, they were looking for firm, fair, and consistent, because a lot of them didn't have that in the free world, and that's why they wound up in the penitentiary. So they actually relied on some of the staff to have that structure to keep them in line and keep them focused.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying, because the consistency leads to ultimately what will be the expectation. And that could be between partners, you know, how you're going to lead your ship eventually. And I will say one thing, when it comes to being inconsistent, what it tells the inmates is that there's a break somewhere. There's a break of alignment, a break of communication, whatever it is. So once they see that there's an inconsistency, I think the inmates start to see a crack or something that's vulnerable that can get them to play sides. And I think that's definitely, that inconsistency really is a crack in just a united front that we have to always showcase. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Yeah, you know, when I think about this, I think about it, you know, from the perspective of what you're doing as an individual, because what you're doing as an individual, if you are intentionally or accidentally, you know, not applying things in a consistent manner, you know, the policies, the rules, the expectations, and so forth, you're leaving a gap there for smarter, more manipulative inmates to be able to, you know, play their little games. And what I mean by that is they're going to be able to affect other inmates who see this. And by pointing that out and exploiting it, they can do a better job of making your job harder. And the harder your job becomes, the less effective that you're going to be. So, you know, over a period of time, you know, you might feel like you're having a harder and harder time, leveraging your sphere of influence, you know, in ways that really truly matter. And so when that starts to happen, when you start to feel that you're losing that authority, one of the reasons for it may be these inmates that are, you know, talking behind your back. They're influencing these other, you know, little knuckleheads behind you. And those people then are getting their chest puffed up because whether you're doing those things or not, those particular inmates, the ones that are more influential, the ones that are more manipulative, are going to try and play that game anyway. So you have to be aware of what your input into the game is like in order to stifle it as much as possible.
Now, I would go as far, I agree, Russ. I would go as far, kind of leaning on what you're saying here too, is that I would say consistency is actually an anchor. You know, whether it's for yourself or the culture of the facility, you know, because if I was, let's say I was a consultant, or we decide to go into consultant later on, the first thing we're looking at are patterns of consistency, you know, whether sadly positive or negative, but you're always looking for consistency, because consistency kind of tells you which way you're headed, you know, which way the facility's going, which way you as a person's going. But when you're inconsistent, there's no reading. You're lost. there's no foundation to start from. So I think when you have that inconsistency, there can't be any authority because you yourself aren't standing on anything. You're not standing on anything that has value. I think more consistent officers that lead to expectation is they're very good with their authority because those expectations keep things in line. Again, it's an anchor that's set. But when you're inconsistent, what are you leaning on? You're leaning on whatever the inmates may expect because if you're inconsistent, someone's got to be swaying you. So I think the people that are truly consistent are the people that are strong and firm in their ways. And you know what's funny? I mean, we said this a while back. I've written it in my books before, firm, fair, consistent. It's not about the treatment of the inmates, but how you yourself deal with those terms. But I'm going to tell you something. After having these dialogues, and maybe if you guys want to discuss on this a little bit, just let me know. But consistency, after just talking about it just now, it takes strength to be consistent because the inmates want you to be inconsistent. So that's a battle that you're fighting almost every moment of the day is the battle of the inmates wanting you to sway. And then you setting your anchor down and say, no, I'm not. And then also working with your partners and the agency, keeping everything consistent. And think about this, guys, with all the interactions that you have throughout the day, through all the different people and the agency itself, on every different level. To translate consistency is extremely hard because that means we have to be aligned on everything and we cannot allow for any inmate to personally maneuver through. But like Russ said, the smarter the inmate, once they break one way, you never know where that can lead because it's like a manipulative inmate. It's just taking the anchor away. There you go. Now you have nowhere to go. Think about that. When an inmate tries to get you to maneuver outside of what everyone else is doing or what's expected of you, what they're doing is they are literally taking your anchor, the strongest thing that has you grounded, and taking it and chucking it. And you may not realize it in the moment, but they are confusing you. And they're literally taking away your sense of authority because they removed your anchor, your foundation of authority. That was pretty cool. I thought that was a unique way of expressing that. You guys have any thoughts on that before we move over to the next one?
No, I mean, I think that's, exactly it. There's so many different ways for them to influence other people around them, including yourself, that it can, really diminish and erode that sense that you have. And you may not even realize that is the specific thing that's doing it.
Yeah, I love that. That was good, guys. That could be a whole another dialogue, the power of consistency. So now this I thought this was a good one. And I believe we start with Russ on this one first is we always tell people in corrections, you got to chase conflict or whatever it is. And avoiding conversations or difficult conversations. I don't know what that's supposed to be. I think it's supposed to be, hold on guys, bear with me guys. I'm my own producer here. It's supposed to be, I knew that. It's supposed to be avoiding confrontations or difficult conversations. Forgive me, guys, but look how quick I could fix it. And it even comes with, comes with StreamYard. All right, so avoiding confrontations or difficult conversations. So, guys, corrections, you cannot have a career where you're doing that. Your whole career is pretty much defined by confrontation and difficult conversations. But I feel that if that does become a time where you're avoiding it, maybe at this point here also becoming hesitant, because that could be authority aspect too. You got to ask yourself why. And you want to hear something funny when it comes to confrontation or difficult conversations. I will tell you this. When I find people avoiding this, it's not necessarily that they're afraid to have the dialogue, because you notice it's not afraid, it's avoid. Avoid is usually because there's a developed relationship with the individual. So I didn't say that they're afraid of confrontation or difficult conversation, because that's different. That means that, hey, you shouldn't be in the position if you're afraid of that. That just is your job. You're going to have it. I said avoiding, because avoiding is when you get tainted by manipulators. Like, I can't believe I got to now, this inmate is my porter, and now I got to have a dialogue with him that I don't want to have because he's my porter. Okay, but you're saying he's my porter. So look at that ownership there. It went from he's a porter to he's my porter. And you're not afraid to have the dialogue because he's your porter. You're afraid to have the dialogue because you're obligated to him because he's your porter. But I think here it's the avoiding the confrontation is, again, you're avoiding it because you've developed a relationship. I feel that, to me, is definitely a big sign that you're losing your sense of authority, but it's not because you're afraid, but rather you're avoiding it because of a developed relationship. What's your thoughts? I mean, I'm sure it can go many different angles, but that was just a perspective.
So, yeah, when I think about, the reasons that people avoid, the confrontational part of it, there's a lot of different reasons. One of them, could be that there is some type of relationship there. The other ones, I should say, though, can be, a lack of development up to this point in your career. I'll tell any officer out there that the key to becoming really good at doing this is putting yourself into uncomfortable positions, putting yourself, at the forefront, being at the tip of the spear, and actually, learning through, both losses and victories, is what makes you a really good, serviceable corrections professional. Going out there and avoiding confrontations, going out there and not being willing to step up and start talking to inmates and saying the difficult things to them, just makes you less effective. And you're never going to be the person out there who's leading the charge, and I don't care, how many pieces of brass that you get on the collar there, you're not going to be ready for that, because that type of leadership comes from having engaged in confrontations. It comes from having engaged in difficult conversations, and it comes from, doing battle within those confines. So, I've said this before, I'm sure in many different videos, man, always be the officer that has your hand raised. Always be the one. Yeah, I'll go do that. I know that's difficult. Yeah, I'm going to go take care of that for you, Sergeant. Be the one that steps forward into those situations, and push people out of the way to try and get that experience. I think that is the key to development, because without that, you're never going to be where you should be. In regards to the development of your career path. And by career, I don't mean hanging more brass on there. I mean, as far as developing both your character and your professional acumen.
Yeah. Hey, Russ, let me ask a question just to follow up on that. What about, like, if it's not that, because you are going to have some people that, you're right, will be afraid to be challenged, which could be just inward. And then basically it's good for them to jump up and kind of be prepared for those challenges and have those what ifs. And anytime there's a chance for conflict or, go ahead and you got to implement the rule, you got to go out there and you got to do it. Get used to being challenged. But what about if it's the avoiding aspect? And what I mean by that, what about if it is someone that's not afraid about being challenged, but rather avoiding it because, I don't know, they developed relationships that make them hesitant and now expressing their authority. Because let's be honest, a key manipulator is going to want to develop a relationship with you, so you avoid, not afraid, because if that manipulator goes to challenge you, then I'm sure the officer will probably have no problem. And I'm talking about an overt challenge. The officer mode will come in, hopefully. But I'm thinking about the inmates playing the, I'm your buddy, and then pushing guilt, which is passive, or pushing, how do you go ahead now? Okay, go ahead, Russ. Sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's just, being soft in the moment, because you do have, some type of relationship. The guy works for you, he's been doing a good job or whatever. How much slack should you be willing to cut him? And the answer to that is generally none. That doesn't mean that we can't take things into account because they're doing a good job, but you just can't do anything that sacrifices the safety and security of the institution. So, my thought on that is if you see someone that's doing that, is tell them, hey, look, you know what? I realize that guy is your porter or whatever, but you know what? You're cutting him too much slack. It's time to, throw a shot across his bow and see how he responds. And either he's going to respond positively or he's going to respond negatively. And if he responds negatively, guess what we're going to do? We're going to fire him. And I find that as a great way to to segue into things. That's all part of training your people. Just teach them how to do that. Teach them how to throw those warning shots out there and see how they respond. And if they don't respond appropriately, you fire them.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get into it a little bit later, but I just want to put something out there. I mean, your authority and preservation relationships. I mean, you're going to be respectful. And if in that respect, when given your authority, if relationships are maintained, that's great. But you will not sacrifice your authority to preserve a relationship. I mean, that's just the key here. I mean, yes, if my authority builds a relationship, that's great because it's centered on my authority. But it's never going to be that my authority is conditional to the preservation of relationships. So I would tell an officer in that situation, it looks like you're trying to preserve a relationship as opposed to occupying your role as what the expectations you want to carry out. What's your thoughts on that, Joe? A lot there, I know, but
yeah, I mean, this profession, our whole career is a damn confrontation. It's full of difficult situations and conversations. But it's one of them things where if you are a frontline correctional officer and you are afraid to have those conversations, or you're afraid of getting challenged or getting into a confrontation with an inmate, there's a problem. There's definitely a problem, and the one thing about that is if you can't do that as a frontline correctional officer, you're damn sure not going to be able to do it as a supervisor. As a sergeant or lieutenant, guess what? Now you're not only having confrontations with the inmate populations, hell, you're having confrontations with your own staff. So it just multiplies as you climb the ranks. So if you don't get a handle on that at the front line stage as a correctional officer, and I used to tell my COs, you guys are supervisors too. You supervise that damn inmate population. That is your job. You are their supervisor. So it's just, you got to instill that. And, when you see an employee who's afraid of having that difficult conversation, you don't have to go have that conversation with that inmate yourself. But like I would take them over. I would walk over there with them and let them have that conversation with that inmate, in my presence. Because I don't know, is this employee just generally afraid? Or are they just lazy and just don't want to deal with it? Either way, I'm going to be there as part of their moral support to, my moral support to them in case that inmate bucks, or, that is my moral support to them as an attention getter is, hey, you need to do your job.
I like that. I do. And guys, it's good to have a dialogue like this because I think that these are concerns that people have that they're not so, they don't express so much because they think that this is the area where they could be seen as soft. I don't think I want people to realize something. When you work in corrections and you're given a position of authority, it's not easy. It's not easy to maintain. It's not easy just to even be given it. So you are going to be challenged, and it's okay to have weaknesses in certain areas. It's good. It's definitely okay to recognize it and then work with those weaknesses. But there has to be a point too where if you can't, develop them, then maybe this is not a profession, or being a correctional officer may not be the role for you. I think one of the ways to identify if this is a role for you is how you wield your authority. 100%. I think that's definitely right off the bat. If you can't wield it through those challenging moments, and it, you feel it, whether you just feel that you can't engage back, or you just don't have the energy, then this is definitely not something you're gonna be able to do for 25, 30 years, because this is really something you do almost on a minute by minute basis. I'll go with Joe first on this, but I got failure to address inappropriate behavior promptly. And I put promptly for a reason. Yeah, that's a good one. So you want to go first, Joe?
Yeah, especially when dealing with the offender population, because that's something that can lead to mortal failure. Um, you know, especially when you're dealing with the offender population. If you don't address inappropriate behavior, and I'm just not talking about inmate to inmate. I'm talking about inmate to staff. If you don't draw that line promptly and quickly, that situation is going to get away from you to the point where you no longer have control of the inmate. The inmate has control of you. There's going to be times where you may find two inmates horse playing. You know, that's something you definitely need to break up promptly, because if not, and it never fails. One of them gets the best of the other one, and there's some hurt feelings on some shoulders and some sleeves. Next thing you know, you got a fist fight over something stupid. When it comes to inmate and staff, there's definitely a lot of inappropriate behaviors you should address right off the bone. You should not let that get away from you, because I'm telling you, the minute you let your authority with an inmate concede to his inappropriate behavior, you're done. It's over. So if an inmate's trying to not play the grab on game, or trying to sneak little innuendos at you, cut it off at the head. Address it right then. It's one of them things. If you don't address it, you bless it.
Yeah, I like that. The reason why, Russ, maybe you'll agree, I added promptly because I feel, as long as it's controlled or strategic, whatever, is the promptness adds that immediate effect of authority. I think the promptness is where the zero tolerance comes in, and not the delay. If there's a behavior that you don't like, I think the promptness sets, it's immediate, as opposed to letting it occur. And then, kind of, now I have to get up. No, I think if the inmates want to see that expectation, see where the zero tolerance is and what you will tolerate and what not tolerate, the quicker you react to the stuff that you will not tolerate, shows an immediate level of authority that I think becomes, well, not always 100%, but they may challenge it less, as opposed to you a little bit more delayed in your reaction.
Yeah. So, when we look at it, this particular banner that you've got on there, I don't know which one it was back there, but we talked about, not enforcing, rules or policy. And that one just kind of left off the promptly part. Right. So what we look at is, I deal with offenders all day long. And one of the things is they have not only an ability to manipulate things like this, but they also truly do have an inability to understand unless things are done, promptly and immediately. Otherwise, they tend to assume that everything is okay. And a lot of times they actually don't have a real good handle on what is appropriate and what's not. They're used to have, come up in the, in the juvenile department, or they've been to jail 15 times, or they've done 3 bids in prison. And so they're kind of used to nobody ever telling them no. They're kind of used to nobody ever calling them on anything. And so if you do things that are out of that range of the heat of the moment, they're not going to remember it. They're not going to pay attention to it. They may flaunt you on it, but some of it may not even be their fault at that point, because there's no impact that's made. They are not as adept at understanding those dynamics unless it is immediately called to their attention. Because at that moment, then they have to and they get pulled around, and then you have a chance to stop that within the process. And anyone that's done any kind of training at all with dogs or anything else knows that you can't punish the dog after the moment has left. And so it's one of those things that you'd better understand, that doing it within the moment makes an impact on that inmate and all of those ones around him too. And so we get a bigger benefit from doing it that way than just simply, waiting later until they can read about it, or, some offhand comment, hey, that thing earlier, don't do that no more, where there's no energy put behind it to make an example or whatever that's worth.
No, I like that because I like the dog example because I think when you act promptly, the inmate's automatically probably connected to what they've done wrong already. So you're just basically, as opposed to waiting so long where the inmate's got to go back. It's like, no, I'm right now. This is what I saw you do. You did it because you just did it, and it's more just, okay, holy shit, I also want to mention something with this too, when it comes to promptly or delayed, is that sometimes you get staff that are very disenfranchised because, their efforts don't get the outcome that they want. And they wind up staying so focused on the outcome that they lose out on their want to enforce rules. And I always tell people, ultimately, your job is about accountability, because if you're disenfranchised, that means the inmates will feel entitled. That's just how the scale goes. So with that said, sometimes when it comes to the authority, and as you become disenfranchised, you don't realize, but you're accepting things that will slowly become the foundation of your authority. So like if I'm dealing with inmates that I just kind of like, they're always getting what they want. Screw it. Why am I going to write them up? It's not going to go nowhere. It's like, well, you still got to write them up. Your job is accountability. Don't worry about the outcome. Do the effort, because you're going to start seeing that your authority is going to start to erode because you're no longer putting in the effort. And then what happens is when you no longer put the effort in, what is will now be what always will be. And now, unfortunately, sadly, that becomes the foundation. That's why I think we're at now with corrections in general. I mean, when you work corrections 20 years ago, it's one way. And then when you see it today, it's like, wow, for me, for 22 years, I see the difference. But for someone who's coming in and kind of seeing corrections where it's at and saying, wow, I can't believe it's got to that point, that's years of accepting things that should have never been accepted. But in their mind, that's the best corrections is. So their zenith is a lot different than ours. Me, Russ, Joe, we know where corrections was, and we know that we may not reach that, but it's good to strive to reach that. But our zenith is a lot different than today's correctional staff. They're I guess their penthouse. They may think they're at the penthouse, but they're still on floor 1. If that makes sense. I think this is good. I wanted to put accept in vague or non-specific explanations from inmates. Let me just mention why, and I'll go with Russ first on this. We are going to have interactions with inmates, even as supervisors. You may have to do interviews, whatever it is. And sometimes we just accept generalities. I don't know. It's because we don't want to put the effort in, or maybe we're just tired. I don't know. But the point is, man, you want to see someone that looks good when they come pushing authorities, when they're at those interviews and they're pushing inmates to those specifics. When they're demanding specifics from the inmates and the inmates are trying to lie in generality, and that person's coming back saying, you're being threatened by who? When did that happen? Excuse me? When? Oh, who? I'm sorry. What did they say? When did it happen? Where did it happen? When they start drawing that specifics, those questions are showcasing authority, and the inmate cannot maneuver the dialogue into where they want to go. An inmate comes up to you general, vague. You come back and give me specifics, and if you can't give me specifics, keep walking. You're not getting what you want, because again, inmates will manipulate for what they want. They do it in generalities because it's harder to prove. But then you get someone that right off the bat says, "Hey, I'm not playing the generality game. You said you were threatened. Who threatened you? When did it happen? What time? And I'm going to look into it all." And then you could really see authority in those type of dialogues when you have one person pushing for specifics, and then you got the inmate trying to maneuver generalities. Would you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, this is what I refer to all the time as circle talking, right? And it happens all the time. And I know Joe's going to know exactly what I'm talking about here. Is you'll question an inmate about something. You may one of the things that I used to like to do is I used to like to take their ID while I was talking to them. And then, I would ask them questions, because I wanted to know what they're doing, why they're in this specific area, why they're doing whatever they're doing. And I make this kind of talk out in a way that I can start to pattern and see what's going on my whole yard. The interaction that I have with them may come to fruition in a search or something later. But in the meantime, I'm filling myself up with a lot of different information. So a typical conversation might be something along the lines as to, okay, I've got his ID, so I know where he lives, but I'm going to ask him anyway. And so I ask him something like, hey, which dorm are you in? And so then they will inevitably, start the conversation. Well, I was just on my way to medical and I'm supposed to go see the nurse over there. And they give you information that has nothing to do with what you've requested of them. And so they try and keep it vague and non-specific. And you can ask them, anything, it'll be like, who do you affiliate with, and they'll say, oh, I just keep to myself or whatever. And then, you're looking at them and they have, like, let's say, obvious skinhead tattoos. Really? So you don't know what any of these tattoos that you have are on there. Oh, and they hesitate and they'll give you, some big circle talking thing, and they never want to get specific, and they want to, give you a bunch of filler information that has nothing to do with anything, and they don't want to be pinned down. And this is just this is not even in the course of maybe, doing any kind of, interrogation on them or fact finding mission. This is just, their normal default setting, and they stick to it all the time. And so I always pin them down, where is it that you live? And, and maybe they'll give you a wrong piece of information. Maybe somebody, took an altered, that particular document so that they could get into some dorm that they're, not supposed to be in while somebody wasn't paying attention. Then what do you have? You know what? Maybe we better go search everyone in that dorm and see if anybody's lumped up. So many times, just by following through like that, I would find people with injuries. I would find, contraband. I would find, cell phones, whatever it was, just by a little inaccuracy in what I was demanding of them. And sometimes all it was filler information, but it put me on top of whatever the game that was being played at the moment out there on the yard or facility was.
Yeah, and you know what? I kind of have two things here. It kind of relates to this, but I have accepting vague or non-specific explanations from inmates, but I think it also bleeds into allowing inmates to dictate the flow of conversation or interaction. So it kind of bleeds into each other. But Joe, would you like to hit up both points as well? Because that is pretty much what we're discussing here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what we call establishing the baseline. You're throwing questions at him, and he's giving you answers that have no bearing on what the fuck you're sitting there talking about to begin with. And during the process of this baseline, where you start the conversation, hey, what are you doing over here? Let me see your lay-in. What are you going to this lay-in for? What are you doing in my hallway? You're judging his your bullshit meter is judging him by the way he's answering the questions. He's in your hallway, but he's telling you about, well, I had this thing happen on the dorm, and okay, I'm asking you, why are you in my hallway? It's one of those where you want him to defeat himself. You don't have to defeat him because he's already defeated. Your job at that point is to make him defeat himself. And that's why, you should never take anything for granted, take anything, at face value. There's always going to be an agenda on his side or her side, depending on what kind of facility you're in. So yeah, when you're asking generalized and investigative questions, and it's not just a all-out interrogation, you're just investigating, why is this inmate here? what reason do they have for being here? And, you're asking simple, down to earth, plain questions, and they're giving you these convoluted answers of something that has no bearing on what he's doing standing in the middle of your hallway at that point in time. So, you should, you should never let an inmate, dictate the way the conversation is going to go. You need to stick to your initial plan and trying to establish why they're there. It's uncanny the answers that you get just asking simple questions sometimes. Hey, why is your mattress not made up? Well, I 2 weeks ago I broke my foot and it swelled up real bad. Okay, what's that got to do with your damn mattress? It's the way they try to hide their what they're doing wrong in a conversation to kind of deflect the blame from themselves on the cool without putting themselves out on Front Street.
Yep. I agree with that. That's where it kind of falls into all the. Oh, go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, I was going to say perfect, because like it's funny because Joe being from Texas, me from California, the same damn experiences with regards to the level that these guys are at, and it always strikes me that there's so many similarities.
I got to mention something with that, Russ. What about my fucking experiences? I mean, you went to Texas and California, but I got experiences too, dude.
Well, yeah, but yeah, you do, but you had not mentioned that specific part.
He's deflecting now and just saying, instead of just coming out and saying, "Now, fuck Jersey." He's going right now.
Yeah, he's deflecting now.
No, I don't want to say anything about Jersey. I don't want those drones showing up here, man.
Oh. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take Russ's advice. If I seen him already here. If I get another chance, I'll video him. But I will tell you one thing, guys. Before we get to the next two, it's pretty freaky. I try not to stay out too long, unless you're there, because these things are big. And I'm in Morris County. Well, let me get past this. We got two more left. Joe first on this one. This is more on the physical side, but I put difficulty maintaining composure in difficult situations, and that could be any composure. I'm not talking about just.
That's a good one, though.
Yeah, because you could have emotional. I mean, there's a lot of things here, but I'll start with Joe first and Russ, if that's okay. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has those bad days, and sometimes, those bad days allows your composure to get away from you over the simplest things. If you're in a situation, it's paramount that you keep your composure, regardless of what the situation is. You could be having a difficult situation with an inmate. Maybe a use of force situation. Don't let your pride and your anger overrule your professionalism. You could be, having a difficult situation regarding, one of your employees. Something may have happened. You may have had a critical incident. You might have had, God forbid, a death on duty. Whether it's inmate death or a staff death. You have to maintain your composure, because all those around you kind of dictate their composure based on your composure. So, regardless of whether it's a one-on-one with an inmate, if he's yelling, you should be talking in a normal voice. Because eventually he's going to see that you're not going to get riled up, and eventually he's going to bring himself down, to the talking level. If shit is just going haywire, you need to find, as a supervisor, you need to find a way to maintain control of the situation, prioritize what you have going on, keep your composure about you, because, if you sound and look excited, chances are your people are going to be the same way.
Yeah, I gotta also say, when it comes to this, guys, I've never. If you want to hear something funny, I've never been afraid to give an order or a directive, but there have been times where I've been concerned. And I'm not going to equate that to being afraid, because if I'm concerned, then I become a bit more strategic. And that point, the odds will go in my favor. If I find myself afraid of a directive, which I don't think I have, I think it would be just more about if I had no control of how that directive had to be given. I'll give an example. If there's a directive that so wait, let's just do this for a question, because I got to really pull myself. So I'm in prison management now. So if I know that there's going to be a directive that could be a bigger concern, I would let staff know of the directive, know what's coming your way, give a time frame for that directive to take place if it's not emergent. Maybe a 3 to 6 month time frame to give the inmates a chance to adjust to, as long as it's not emergent. I'm talking about, maybe a discretionary directive, but that has to be implemented. It's not emergent. You got time to implement it. So you don't want to implement it right away. And then at that point, staff is just really just kind of keeping the momentum. But I would also work with the tier reps of the unit, so you kind of, it eliminates a lot of the one-on-one that you don't want to force the officers into one-on-one. So maybe I would try to implement it by doing it through the tier reps, putting it out on blast, putting it out on the memos, using the grievance system. And then again, a time, like, I'll give out the directive today for something that's going to happen in 6 months, because the cool thing about that is that you give the inmates a chance to air their grievances out along the way until it just becomes exhausted, as opposed to doing it all at once and they come at you. So again, for me, the concerns could be in the consequence, but to be afraid. Now, if I was an officer, I figure the thing I would like to do is, if I had a directive that I was concerned with, and I'm not going to say afraid, I'll say concerned, then I'll work with whoever I got to work with to make sure that when I implement that directive, the odds are on my side. So we're prepared. But to be afraid, I think at that point, if you're afraid and you're going to give a directive, inmates are going to see it. And you're going to probably get challenged more overtly. So if the inmates see your composure as afraid or weak, their challenge to it won't be a manipulative challenge. It will be an outright threat. Remember, they're gonna react to your body language to see how they can maneuver around whatever that directive is. So if your composure is being afraid or scared, then they're gonna reinforce that. They're gonna push. But if you're more looking to avoid or to be hesitant because you have that relationship, they may play the guilt card. Whatever it is. But again, that composure matters, because how the inmates read you is how they're going to react. I think that makes sense, at least from my experience. What's your thoughts, Russ?
Yeah, you have to be aware at the level that you're operating at. And so there's a lot of different things that can come into the whole idea about, difficulty in maintaining your composure. Are you having that difficulty because of what's going on at that moment in time at the facility? Or are you experiencing that difficulty because something else is diminishing your ability to respond to things, by something that's going on at home, or something that happened in your past that's being brought up by this incident? We're corrections professionals, but we're humans as well. You should have an idea about what your emotional state and emotional level is on any given day that you're operating inside such an environment. There may be times where you do not have a present ability to operate within the facility that you're in. You might have to remove yourself from it. I've seen instances, where officers, have had to be removed because, they're going through a divorce, or or they're having, some other type of, emotional breakdown. I've seen, officers become upset because, unfortunately, in this business, we've experienced numerous officers, who've ended up, committing suicide. So it's incumbent upon you to not display those things to the inmate population. Number one, it diminishes your authority immediately. It makes inmates think that they can get over on you. It puts unnecessary stories in the pipeline, because that stuff is going to spread, right? And last but not least is it's going to give them, a marker that they can use against you potentially in the future. So what I would also say about that is take care of yourself. Being able to self care and make you emotionally strong, physically strong, and professionally strong is going to do a lot to mitigate that away. Never, never show fear, never show, anything to an inmate that's going to give them one leg up on you.
Right. And guys, before we get to the last bullet, I want people to know something. Authority, even though we've been pushing a lot about directives, authority comes across in your presence, your reactions, whatever it is. I guess in general, authority, if you're looking at it inwards, is felt before seen, at least by you. So if it's me, I have to feel it first before you see it in my behaviors. But the inmates need to see it before they feel it. It's kind of like the opposite, if you will. So like for me, I got to feel confident, I got to, be in it to win it. And then all of a sudden my mindset kind of aligns with my behaviors. But again, the inmates aren't in my, they may try to get in my head, but they're not in my head, hopefully. So they see my behaviors first and then they feel it. So you feel it and then see it, they see it and then feel it. And then that to me is correct. I believe so. I believe that's how authority is carried out on one end and perceived on the other. The last part we have, and this is, I saved it for last. This is definitely falls within my realm of manipulation. But you will have officers that look to be popular over looking to be respected. And then that falls into seeking approval or validation from inmates instead of maintaining authority. Because again, this goes into what we said before. I'm looking to preserve the relationship as opposed to carry out my duties. We kind of touched on it before, but maybe we'll devote a little bit more to it because it's that important, because this happens a lot more than people may think. I want to be the popular person, and therefore I don't want to get inmates angry. And the inmates will feed into that. Hey, I thought you weren't like the rest of them, or I thought you were one of the nice ones. And those are things that when they say that, they're testing you, or your need to be liked or your need to be popular. And if inmates are playing that game on you, then they know that you rather be liked or popular than to actually play your professional role. And I will tell you one thing in corrections: you will not be liked by the inmates, because your job is to enforce rules. And in some cases, their job may be to break them. What's your thoughts on this, Russ?
Yeah, human beings, we tend to, always want to take the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance sometimes only means that the resistance seems less at that moment in time. It's usually not. It's usually actually a worse path as you get down it, because things will erode and get worse and worse, and eventually put you into an untenable position that threatens either your personal safety or your professional safety. And by that, I mean your job, because you're going to lose your job by going down that road. The idea of, seeking approval, seeking popularity, that might seem the easy way to manage things, but it's not. This is where I always think about, I always think about, the poem about the road less traveled, which is supposed to be, kind of, upbeat. And it was a cool thing that he took the road less traveled. But when I apply it to corrections, you know what? Sometimes the only good path is the hard path. And sometimes that's just where you have to be. And you have to live with the expectation that, there's not going to be an easy shift. You might luck out and you might have many easy shifts. But if you come there with the expectation that it's going to be an easy shift, you're potentially setting yourself up for failure, because that feeds into the whole complacency paradigm. If you don't want to be complacent, you need to choose those hard paths. You need to put yourself in a position where you're blazing the trail forward, and hopefully you have enough people behind you that you're going to, carry the day, as it were. But when you just decide that, hey, you're going to do this based on approval, that you're going to do it based on validation from the inmates, because they're going to think you're a cool guy too, that you're just like the homeboy that they never had or whatever, this will come back to bite you. And we've seen this repeatedly over and over again, where officers, even with inmates that they have very little to do with, suddenly they place trust in them. They get to they get to where they're taking an inmate to a hospital, and they just open up the car door. Hey, come on out. And they've failed in the most basic safety and security instances. And the next thing you know, we have another inmate on the run. Why? You cannot trust inmates. And if you are seeking approval and validation, you've already given them the win, because at some point they're going to leverage it against you, and they're going to take advantage. And hopefully it doesn't end up with somebody losing their life.
I agree. And what's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, you should never seek approval or validation from any kind of inmate, regardless of what situation you're in. If you're seeking approval from the inmate population instead of trying to, maintain a professionalism with your staff, you're already done for. Those are the people I start looking at. Okay, or are you dirty? Have you already been compromised? Are you bringing in contraband? Seeking approval or any kind of validation from the inmate population, to them it's just a game. They're using everything you tell them against others. They're going to use it against you. You think you're venting, they're recording. Everything you say is going on a hard drive between their ears, and at some point it's going to be used against you later on down the road, either in a corruption scheme. They're going to back you into a corner and say, hey, look, you told us all this shit. I can, if you don't want me to tell it, you're going to bring me in some tobacco. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Don't do it.
Yeah, I agree. And guys, again, this was just a good dialogue. I actually am going to add the authority and corrections felt before it's seen. I'm going to add that as one of the topics for the book that I'm preparing for the rookies. So that's going to be a big book, guys, if it works out right. It's good. Carry it along with you. Hey, Joe, you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I think this was a good dialogue. Hopefully, it was something that somebody can use to maybe either do some self-reflection to see where they're at in their career, where they're at in their professionalism and their authority. Maybe a takeaway that you can use to, maybe an eye opener. Maybe you might be able to save a coworker that may be exhibiting some of these signs. Something you can kind of take them under your wing and kind of lead them back towards the path that they need to be on. We put this stuff out there, for useful information, because, these are all things that we've seen in our careers. These are all things that, have happened. This is real life, real time correctional stuff that has happened. You know, it may not have happened on your facility or on your shift, but at some point it's going to. Recognize the signs, you know, even if it's yourself. You know, maybe we put something out there that made you sit back and go, holy shit, is this what I'm doing? Am I doing this? You know, we put it out there because of the fact that we want to help, you know, the correctional professionals in any way, shape, or form that we can. Not, you know, we're not out there to down anybody. We're not out there to, you know, to put anybody down, but, you know, understand one thing, this job is not for everybody. And, you know, if you're one of the individuals that, you know, have exhibited some of the more severe signs that we've talked about, this career may not be for you. It may be time for you to look elsewhere before you get yourself hurt or, God forbid, killed, or maybe one of your coworkers. So, you know, take this information that we give you, take it to heart, understand where we're coming from, and realize that, you know, the corrections profession is not just a job. It's actually a career, and it can be a very dangerous career if not handled properly.
I agree with that. And Russ, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, you know, I think that there's, you know, a lot of guys and gals out there who are already right there on this. You know, they know what they're doing. They've got some experience. Maybe they're even a natural at this kind of thing. But what we've done here is we've taken things that are, you know, abstract, and we brought them out to look at and examine and to make them concrete so that people can think about them from a point of doing this in an intentional fashion. And when you do it in an intentional fashion, that's where you really make the impact, because the real impact doesn't happen between you and the inmates. The real impact happens with good people taking this kind of information and modeling it for others so that they can see what it's about, and actually creating, you know, more people with more talent in this. And that's the real genius to me of you know, having a forum like Tier Talk. Is not for me to be able to, you know, influence one person to do something, but to have someone go out there and start modeling this stuff and start talking about it, maybe talking about it, or just even just the modeling, and then taking and applying it. Because it's one thing to know something and know how it works. It's another thing to apply it and see it bear fruit. And when we see it bear fruit, that's where the real impact to corrections comes. And so that's why the more the deeper that we got into this, the more I liked this conversation, because there were so many things, you know, from my past that came up that I was thinking about while this was going on, and just, you know, wanting to, you know, be able to put this out there. This has got to be one of our top videos of all time, top 10 minimum.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a good dialogue. I think for me, the main thought is that your authority goes beyond your uniform. Like Russ said, it's an intentional effort. You know, you want to be passive in this profession, and you'll be disenfranchised, and your authority will go with it. Or you want to make this intentional? No, well, then that's great, because then every effort will be intentional, and then you will maintain your authority. But again, coming into this job thinking that your uniform will give you that authority you need, you'll realize how quick that doesn't matter. Trust and believe, they don't care about the uniform. It's about you. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, come hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.